Chara parents, it's Miss Megan, your school director here, and today for our Chara Parent University series, I am joined with Dr. Belgray. She is a primary care physician at Houston Methodist, and she is a fellow Chara mom and has had all three of her dancers be here through Chara growing up, and now they've all kind of diverged into different things, but her oldest daughter is in athletics, playing volleyball and basketball and track, all the things, and her middle daughter is currently a Clear Springs Silverado, and then her youngest daughter is a competitive gymnast. So she's really in the throes with lots of different children in lots of different athletic activities. And we have her here today to talk to us about how do we keep our dancers healthy? How do you help your dancers recover from their rehearsals and their classes and just continue that nice longevity of having a healthy dance career? So we have several questions for you today, Dr. Belgray. And so we're hoping you can help us and help our parents.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one is, when a dancer is feeling like they may have sustained an injury, what protocol should they follow and when should they seek medical attention?
So just the rule of thumb is RICE. So rest, ice, compression, elevation. So the typical is, oh, well, maybe I put a little heat on it. Well, we want to do RICE first and ice. And that helps with inflammation, calms down the inflammation. Any swelling, it calms that down. And the other thing is you don't want to completely restrict that area. So just light movement, not to the point of pain, but to the point of, okay, am I going to be okay or do I need to pull back? And you usually want to do RICE for about 3-4 days. If beyond that you're still having pain, you want to seek medical attention. Plus or minus ibuprofen, Aleve, Advil, so an anti-inflammatory. So sometimes that'll help with some of the internal pain, and some will use Tylenol. So it just really depends on what works.
How do dancers determine between aches and soreness and pain and injury?
So I usually say if it stops you from really either weight bearing or you're trying to be flexible and it stops you from moving, then you really want to let mom or dad know, let an adult know. We want the kids to be able to express that. Let your teacher know, dance teacher know, so that way they're aware. And a lot of the competitive dancers or athletes, they're afraid to say when they hurt. So they have to express, and I think as parents, we have to be aware. It's like, okay, what's going on? How are you feeling? Do that check-in. Because the last thing they want to do is be out of their sport.
100%.
So they won't express it, and so they may push beyond where they need to be and cause further injury.
Really end up injured. For sure. I think I always like to talk to our dancers and our teachers about, when a dancer comes to you and says, this is how I'm feeling today, always saying, okay, do your best, but if something needs to be modified or, accommodated, let's do that. And so definitely coming forthright to the teachers and saying, my knee's kind of been acting funny, allowing the teacher to observe and see like, oh, well, in that plie, the knees aren't going over the toes. So you are putting a lot of internal pressure on the interior of that knee there, things like that. And then it allows them to help make those physical corrections and or pull back on something. So
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's great. Question number 2, what can our dancers do to help relieve muscle soreness?
So the number one thing is prevention, right? So hydration, water. So we want to make sure, so I like using the rule of thumb of 50% of your body weight. So if you're 100 pounds, 50 ounces of water, just as a standard for hydration. And from there, pre-exercise, you want to drink water prior to. So we usually say about 8-10 ounces of water, 16 ounces of water before exercise. During, for every 15 minutes that you're doing your high performance, you want to do about 8 ounces. And then after, we need to hydrate. So, and especially we're getting sweaty, we're expending a lot of just loss through sweat. We want to replenish that. And muscles, they contract. So when you're not hydrated, they contract, so you're going to have more cramping. And typically the cramping that I hear about is not during. They typically feel okay. It's when they get home in the evening, they're sore. But even during, if they're not able to overcome that move because their muscles are now squeezing and tightening up, you want to hydrate. Energy drinks, not so good.
I hope everybody's listening out there. It's coming from Dr. Belgray. Tell us about that.
So caffeine, it is your worst enemy because it's dehydrating.
Sure.
So we love Alani, Celsius, Red Bull, Starbucks. I'm sorry. It's not the best thing prior to exercise.
Right.
It is actually deteriorating to the hydration model.
Right.
So if you are going to be performing an electrolyte drinks such as Gatorade or Powerade, now they do have some sugar in it, but you definitely would prefer that.
Yeah.
Now outside of exercise, those are not the best hydrators. Okay. So you don't want to reach for Gatorade and Powerade just for your general hydration. Those are for performance. Okay. Not for hydration outside of your exercise.
Right. Awesome. So if dancers come home, they're really sore, they're an intensive week, and by day 3, they're like, Miss Megan, I don't think I can move anymore. Is there anything else besides that hydration, icing or anything like that?
So I like Epsom salt.
Yeah.
Warm Epsom salt bath. That always helps loosen the muscles. And you can do the ones with lavender, which are also relaxing.
Yeah.
So my oldest daughter, she is in basketball, and so she does ice baths. Okay. It doesn't have to be extensive, 5 to 10 minutes of ice bath. We're not trying to go into hypothermia, but sometimes that helps with the soreness as well.
Sure.
So, but I think looking at each of your athletes, each of your dancers, and seeing like what works best for you.
Sure.
Epsom salt may work best for one, and ice bath works better for another, or just simple hydration.
Right. I've seen a lot of our dancers using some of those topical creams. Are those good, like the BioFreeze or Bengay or different things like that?
Those help. They help with the soreness and achiness, and typically you can apply it to the area that's most sore. So something like Voltaren gel, it's an anti-inflammatory, it's topical, so you can rub it to the sore area and it triggers that area instead of trying to take something oral, trying to figure out, okay, which area does my body need it most? So Bengay, Salon Pause patches, those are great. They have an anti-inflammatory effect. So if you're having back soreness, you could utilize that as well.
Awesome. And, Miss Dr. Belgray and I were chatting earlier, and I just want to remind our dancers about, proper stretching, making sure that we're always warming up before we do any sort of stretching. And when we're stretching, there's no need to overstretch. There's a lot of studies out there with physiotherapists and such that have really found that overstretching by placing your leg on a higher thing like a stool or a chair actually really causes more damage than good. Your regular body weight and your regular stretching is really all the body needs. You're already hypermobile as a dancer. You've been stretching for such a long time. You don't really need to force the stretching beyond its point by doing the overstretching and things like that. And I think that's where a lot of that soreness can kind of come from. And so just making sure, once again, that you're warming up properly. No need to overstretch, and just following your teacher's, technical advice to make sure that you're stretching in a proper way so that you can, once again, kind of help prevent some of that soreness that might happen.
And I add to that, and there's so much online resources. Show your teacher.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been looking at this. Is this safe for me to do?
Sure.
Ask they're the experts.
Yeah.
Ask, like, is this something that I can do? There are so many things. Instagram, you see reels all the time, and don't try something just because you've seen it.
Right.
Ask for the advice of the experts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I recently had a dancer who was using a foot stretcher, which is kind of an apparatus that you put your foot in, and it's supposed to help to stretch out the top of the foot. And, looking at some articles that I had heard about in a previous training, it can really put impingement on that Achilles tendon and, really provide, some possible damage. And so I just provided that resource to the parents, and I said, make your best choice for yourself. But, our teachers are here and have done so many trainings and just really want to help the dancers to achieve the same result, but in a safe way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Our next question, how can dancers best fuel their bodies for physical activity?
Okay. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but hydrate. If you're providing the right hydration, your muscles love it, your body loves it. It provides the energy and resource that you need to be able to be your best during your class.
Sure.
And not to mention, it just lubricates the joints, it lubricates the muscles. And so for our hyper flexible dancers, it really just adds that flexibility and mobility.
Sure. Yeah.
And a better time to do it to allow you to have that stretch that's natural.
Right. Absolutely. What should they be eating, Dr. Belgray?
So I have a quick list.
Okay.
So you want to think as a parent, we're about to perform or we're getting on stage or before we're going to exercise or going to class. So I have these are the good choice or the better choice, the not so good choice.
Okay, yes,
so our healthy food choice, grilled chicken, turkey, fish. Our not so good choice, fried chicken, fried fish.
Okay.
Not going to be the best for our performers.
Even during Lent, on the Lenten fish fries?
Man. Let's go with the lean.
Okay.
You know, we don't want to be heavy before we perform.
Okay, yes ma'am, yes ma'am.
So lean beef or lean pork versus your burger, your sausage, your bacon, not to mention the heartburn.
Right.
I mean, we don't need acid coming up when we're turned and flipped upside down.
Right, yeah.
Not good.
Not good.
Fruits, veggies, salads, veggie-based soups versus French fries, fried rice, Alfredo, cheese sauces, not so good.
Right.
Those are all dairy.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned several dairy.
Right.
I mean, our tummies just don't handle that as well. And we don't want bloated dancers.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And so good protein, nuts, trail mix, seeds, peanut butter, not so good, chips, cheese curls, pork rinds.
Okay.
So pork rinds have actually become a common
keto,
like, hey,
paleo, all that kind of stuff.
Because we have that protein.
Right.
Not so much for your performance athletes.
Okay.
Eggs or egg substitute, good choice.
Sure.
An omelet loaded with cheese, not so much. Hash browns, sausage. Chick-fil-A, maybe not the best option right before we're going to perform.
Sure.
If you're getting the breakfast.
Right.
Try to go with maybe the leaner.
Yeah.
If you are going to get Chick-fil-A or something like that, quick grab, go with the grilled chicken.
Okay.
And maybe instead of the hash browns, we do something as a substitute.
Right. Okay.
Whole grain breads, whole grain rice, whole grain pasta versus your highly processed white pastas, white rice. And so we're just trying to be better with our choices. It's not to say that you can't eat these things. I mean,
moderation.
Yes. These are teenagers, kids. Chicken nuggets are going to be in their lives. It's just everything in moderation.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Those are great tips. How much rest should a dancer be getting?
Okay. So we're talking about kids. 7 to 10 hours of rest.
Okay.
I know that seems a lot,
Yeah.
But if we can even round it out and average about 8 hours,
Right.
these dancers need recovery. And we need it for school,
Right.
we need it for brain health, but we also need it for physical health.
Right.
Our bodies have to recover and rest. And if we're
Right.
not getting enough rest, we're not at our best.
Right. Awesome. Dr. Belgray, thank you so much for being here today. We're on to our last question for today. Some really great advice coming from this conversation. What is your best advice for having a healthy body? So in general, what should we be shooting for with our dancers?
So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Number 1, hydrate.
Yep.
Number 2, rest.
Yep.
Number 3, making sure you're having good recovery, stretching, and eating healthy.
Yeah.
Those are really important, but I'll add just a little adage is cross training.
Yeah.
These are dancers, and typically they're not doing any exercise outside of dance. And what that does is their bodies are used to using the same muscle groups.
Right.
So cross training in the sense of maybe going to the gym and doing weights, doing resistance training in a different way, triggering the muscles differently, strengthening different muscle types, muscle groups that maybe you don't use in dance or use differently.
Sure.
And if we're doing cardio outside of that, maybe treadmill, light run, jog, the glider, just really cross-training the body. Injuries, they are potential, and a lot of times it's because there are certain body muscles that are just weaker.
Right.
And the body doesn't know what to do with that
Sure.
if all they've been doing is one sport.
Right.
Or one type of sport.
Right. Yeah. In one of our earlier Chara Parent University series, I talked a little bit about ensuring that your dancers cross-train even within their dancing career.
Yeah.
So even if they are typically, going on to high school drill team, or they're going to be doing primarily jazz and, contemporary based techniques, their ballet, their hip hop, their tap, their acro are all going to support the things that they're doing and allow them to exactly like you're saying, build muscle groups in different ways as well to just help to reduce that overuse injury that can occur there. So I think that's, I really encourage that cross training. I think that's so great. And then I think also just reminding dancers too that they need to be, resting exactly like you said. And so what kind of is our markers for when do our dancers need to stay home? When should they not come to class?
So burnout is real.
Yeah.
And so some of these dancers have been dancing since they were 2 years old, very young. And sometimes it's just as a parent checking in.
Right.
How are we doing?
Yep.
Where are we at? We're loading them with a pretty busy schedule.
Right.
And sometimes a break is okay.
Yeah.
And saying that we don't want a burned out dancer who loses motivation because now we're going to not do the right technique or maybe be a little sloppy with it.
Right.
Checking in with your dance teacher and saying, I'm noticing that she's not as enthusiastic about going. Maybe it's something social.
Right.
Maybe it's something, maybe it's just within them.
Sure.
And taking a break is okay.
Yeah.
And then, recharge later. But I think understanding and checking in on the mental health.
Sure.
Dancers they are very much, or any athlete, they're harder on themselves than anyone else can be.
Absolutely.
So taking that break is important if needed.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that they'll never go back.
Right.
It just means maybe a pause is okay.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a long pause. It may be just talking to teacher and saying, right now I'm just feeling some burnout.
Yeah.
But that open communication is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and especially as they get older, it's just really doing that check-in and reassessment.
Yeah. Is there any parting words that you would leave to your fellow dance moms who are trying their darndest to help their dancers achieve their goals in a very, competitive community and atmosphere? What would you just leave those parents with?
So we've been at Chara for many, many years, and as we've gone through each stage, so my youngest daughter, she's pivoted to gymnastics, but she still recalls back to, oh my gosh, I gotta point my toes when I'm coming up, when I'm doing my floor exercise.
Sure.
My oldest, she transitioned to basketball, where she is thriving there, and she's kind of deciding her collegiate years. And then Ariella is now on drill team. But I think that constant check-in and just seeing where they're at with things. And as a parent, I am not a dancer, y'all. Never have been.
No.
I did do a hip hop hair dance.
There was a whole Belgrade unit.
We
on
did.
Stage.
Yes, we did that family dance. But I think being supportive of your kids, where they're at, and understanding you may not be the expert, but ask.
Yeah.
I think I've asked you so many questions.
Yeah.
Ariella experienced an injury. So the first thought that I had is, how do we get her recovered?
Yeah.
And I reached out to you. It's like, you are the expert.
Yeah.
I am not. So all things in recovering were really important. And injuries are tough.
Right.
And I think in the injury, it's how do you help your dancer recover? A lot of it's mental health as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And just being supportive.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot of words, y'all. The ballet curriculum, I've said all the words wrong. I'm like, Ariella, do X, Y, and she's like, Mom, that's not even how you say it. So I'm learning.
Yeah.
I think as parents, we learn we're not the experts, but it's kind of fun as we go. My husband has, when we were with COVID and we were doing the virtual classes.
Yeah, oh, Mr. Darren.
Man, he was like, no, Ariella, nope, that's not the right. That is not a plie.
Yeah.
And then he was demonstrating. I wish we took videos.
Oh, man.
But I think as a family is just, getting in there, volunteering, being active, that helps you to connect with the studio.
Yeah. And I think you're sharing a really good, trusted advisors, seeking those resources. We always kind of say, you don't go to the dentist and they say, you have a cavity and you're like, oh, are you sure? You trust that resource. And so if you have a question, something in your gut feels like, I've just got to ask this, or, there's no stupid question. You know what I mean? Just, reach out and ask. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to seek counsel other places as well, too, because we only want what's best for your dancer. And so we're just so thankful that you are here with us today, Dr. Belgrade. And we'll see you next month with our next installment of Chara Parent U.